Well, I'm so glad you've joined us for part one of a series that we're calling The Struggle is Real. I don't think any married couple or any couple could relate to that title package. I must confess, I think I've watched it 50 times. I don't know, there's something very therapeutic about it and something very, very real. But anyway, hey, my name's Carey and Nieuwhof. My wife, Toni, is going to be joining me. Yes, I'm Carey, she's Toni, we know. But she's going to be joining me for most of this message today. But I want to welcome you to a series. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about marriage. We're talking about parenting, being single, dating, sex, the whole deal. And next week, even about social media and its impact on us today. And what do you think about that? How do you deal with that? So series is called The Struggle is Real because the struggle is real. And you might think, well, you know, as a pastor, I don't have any issues in my marriage. And you would be wrong. We have all kinds of issues in our marriage. And you know what's fun? We didn't plan this, but I actually figured it out this week. It was 30 years ago today that I first said to my wife, and she said to me, you know, we're kind of interested in each other. Maybe we should date. That was 30 years ago today. And so it's kind of fun that we're doing this series now, talking about the real relationship that we've had. And I know you're probably thinking, well, that's impossible. You know, how old were you guys, 5? Yes, we were 5 30 years ago. No, we were in law school, and law school is kind of interesting. We'll talk about more about that. But I'll tell you, we have had everything you can imagine go on in our marriage. Not everything you can imagine, you know, there's been no affair, anything like that, but just the everyday struggles that you've had, that we've had. And here's what I've learned about marriage, and I just want to frame this, and then we're going to get Toni up here, and she is much better looking than I am, so that will be the best part of the marriage, or message rather, I should say, also the marriage. Also, everybody who gets married, how about this? Everyone who gets married intends to stay married. Isn't that true? I've done a lot of weddings. I have been involved in one as a participant. And of all the couples that I've been involved with in marriage, you know, I've never seen a couple stand at the front of the altar and go, you know, I'm going to give this 3 weeks. It's never happened, right? When you go through all of that, you're like, this is forever. But what we've learned and what you've learned is that intention doesn't always determine outcome. Intention doesn't always determine outcome. Even though you intend to stay in love, even though you intend to be faithful, even though you intend that this is going to last forever, it doesn't always work out this way. And here's the problem. In every relationship, gaps open up between your intentions and your emotions. And we live in a very emotional age. And what happens is the gap just gets wider and wider. And it's like, well, I want to be in love. I want to stay faithful. I want to care about her. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good wife. But I'm just not feeling it anymore. Whatever spark that was, it's gone. Whatever conflict is there, that's real. And I don't know how to get around it. And a number of years ago, I've been a Christian since I was in my teenage years, grew up in a Christian home, the whole deal. But I realized just over a decade ago that the reason that I struggled with this at times, or my intention, and we've stayed married for 28 years, and we'll talk about that, but at the heart of that was a misdefinition of love. And we've talked about this before, it's worth repeating, but most of us misdefine love. Most of us misdefine love. If you have never opened up the Bible, I promise you, you probably misdefined love. If you've opened up the Bible and you read it every day, I promise you, there's about a 90% chance that you've misdefined love. Because what our culture says love is, and what love actually is, and what Jesus said it is, are very different things. And I remember reading my Bible, a passage I had read many, many times, even preached on, over a decade ago. I was reading from John chapter 13. I just want to look at one verse. And Jesus said something really interesting. He said, so now, he's talking to all of his followers, I'm giving you a new commandment. So again, if you know the Bible at all, and if you don't, we're really, really glad you're here. We're really glad you're watching. We're really glad you're at one of our locations. But you would know that prior to Jesus coming, that part of the Bible is called the Old Testament. And there's a lot of commandments. In fact, somebody cataloged them. There's 613 in what we call the Old Testament. And we've kind of summarized the top 10 into the 10 commandments. And then Jesus came along and he says, okay, I know there's a whole bunch. I'm going to give you 2. And then in this moment, he said, actually, I'm going to narrow it to 1. You want to know what the new commandment is? You want to know what the most important commandment is? Here it is. Love each other. Now, again, I read that, and you're probably like, okay, Carey, what is the point? I don't get it. Okay, we're supposed to love each other. But finally, one day, it just hit me. And I went, wait a minute. He is commanding us to have an emotion. And you can't command an emotion. I can't just sit there and say, okay, see this person? Love her. Because our culture defines love as, oh, that's something I feel, it's something I fall into. Jesus meant something very different by love. And what I've learned over time, we taught this before, it bears repeating, that love is not an emotion. Like is an emotion, love is a decision. Love is a decision. But think about how we use the word love. You say you love chocolate. You say you love football. And then you look at your spouse and go, and I love you too, honey. You better be meaning different things by that, all right? Or your marriage really is in trouble. If you love your wife the way you love football, that is an issue, all right? Some of you are like, actually, I love football more. Okay, glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. But love is actually a decision. It's not an emotion. It's a decision to stay with somebody, whether you feel like it or not. It's a decision to fight for a relationship, not with somebody. But where a lot of us find ourselves, and this is where Toni and I found ourselves a number of years ago, is like part of those emotions have died. That the spark's gone, or the conflict is so high, you don't know how you're going to get through it. Or you're at the point where you're like, I'm just not feeling this anymore. And some of you, honestly, whether you're Christian, whether you're not, whether it's your first day in church, whether it's your 1,000th, it doesn't really matter. Some of you would say, I feel like some of my relationship is dead. I feel like there are parts. Maybe the intimacy is dead. Maybe the emotion is dead. Maybe the relationship, the friendship is dead. And if part of your relationship has died, the best place to find resurrection is in a graveyard. So the good news is you came to the right place. And that's what Jesus specializes in, is if your relationship is like, it's in the graveyard, man, I'm going to a lawyer on Wednesday. All right, it's done. Or I'm staying here, but I don't know how it can live again. You came to the right place. And Toni and I, when we were talking about what we were going to talk about today, we would tell you this, that our marriage hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy. We've had all kinds of issues that we've had to surmount, but it's been so worth it. And so that's what we want to talk to you about today. And I would love for you to join me in welcoming my bride, my wife, Toni Nieuwhof.
Morning.
So it was 30 years ago today where I threw a party at my place and you came, and my infatuation with you went back a couple of months to that first week in September, and we were both first-year law students at Osgood. And so the thing about law school is when you're finished undergrad, all your friends kind of go in different directions. It's kind of like high school. You're surprised if any of them show up wherever you go to college or university. At law school, it's even more rare to have anyone you know. So we're all a bunch of strangers. And basically, at that time anyway, first year law school, you just line up all week for the first week. Mm-hmm. And so we're in this big line in the Commons area. And I remember the first time I saw you. And you had just stepped out of line. I know exactly what you were wearing. And it was like there was a light from heaven that shone down on Toni. And the angels were like, ah! And it was love at first sight. But you didn't notice me.
It's true.
So how did you notice me?
Well, we
Because I was on a hunt. Like at that point, I was on like, who is that girl? I got to get to know her.
Well, we ended up being in the same law school section. And
Thank you, God.
so we ended up having some
class.
friends in common. And after a few weeks, one of my friends said, hey, I think that guy likes you. He keeps staring at you.
Every class. It's like, I did really bad at law school because I couldn't focus.
So we're sitting in class one day, and our law school was an excellent law school, but the environment left a bit to be desired. It was, built in the 60s, and it had the brown brick walls and the vanilla floors and white tables. And anyway, we were in contract class, and there's a sea of students there, and all of a sudden I got this note in my hand, and I thought, are we in grade school? So there was nothing on the outside, opened it up, and seriously, this is what it said.
And we had already met. But,
we had met,
yeah.
Yes. It said, Toni, know your U.S. presidents. And then it listed all the presidents from Abraham Lincoln to Ronald Reagan with all their years in office.
But you should
Seriously.
know. And
This
then,
was
and then
the
I
ne-
had another list with all the Canadian prime ministers and their dates. It got complicated in the 1890s, but anyway.
Oh, yeah. So it was like, oh, the old know your U.S. president's pickup line.
It's a bad pickup line, guys. It's a bad line. Do not use it.
So in spite of that, we developed a friendship. Our friendship grew deeper, and about 18 months later, we were engaged, and then a year after that, we were married.
Yeah.
Married during law school, and so...
And being married to me, the romance never wore off. It's been awesome. No, we did hit a snag or two.
Well, yeah, so we married for love, as many people do. Most people marry for love, and when we get married, we have a long list of things we really love about our partners, all their strengths. And then we find as time goes on, we notice some other things. We notice some of the weaknesses, shall I say. And so then we go on in time, and eventually we found that, we were married in law school, so we both received a legal training. And you know what that makes us? Professional fighters. Mm-hmm. So we found that we just ended up being absolute fierce advocates for our own position, and we kind of found ourselves in a vicious cycle of conflict.
So fast forward a number of years, and we find ourselves up here starting ministry, and it got hard. And one of the first things we learned that we had to do, because we both shared a commitment to each other and to Christ, even when the emotions got tough, was we learned we had to put our obedience ahead of our emotions. Mm-hmm. And that got hard, and it was actually in the vortex of ministry, the first few years of ministry, where it got, well, probably a few years in, where it got probably the most difficult. So we had 2 kids, and they're young, and the churches were really small when I started here, but almost from day one they started to grow. And I didn't really know how to handle all that growth, and it was really difficult. And so I made a bad math formula that more people equaled more hours, and more hours equaled more faithfulness. So as the conflict kind of grew at home, I made the mistake of burying myself at work and in my work. Because I knew as a Christian and as a pastor, couldn't alcohol, no, drugs, no, sex outside of marriage, no, all those things were a no. But what I did was I started to really pour myself into my work, and my workaholism started to mask and allowed me to ignore some of the issues that were going on between us and the things I didn't like at home. And what's really difficult for men in particular, there's a writer and a thinker who says that women crave love and men crave respect. And it's very easy to get respect at work as a guy, much easier than it is at home. And respect is earned, but I found that I had respect at work and it wasn't always reciprocated at home. So I kind of buried myself in the conflict that we were experiencing in work.
Yeah, and well, you know what it's like to have a full life. Those of you who are married and you have kids, you know that you can easily spend all your time with work and volunteering and commitments and kids' activities, and then just fail to leave time for your marriage. And we did that. We did that for a long time, and we found that we sort of got into this vicious cycle of conflict. And I wouldn't have time to go into all the reasons we had conflict, but just to give you a flavor of it, Carey was spending long hours at work, and so I was working as well, and I was also parenting. I worked part-time, so sometimes Carey would come home, and the toys would still be around, and the kitchen might be a mess, and dinner might be 20 minutes late, and so you came home and you would get rattled. Mm-hmm. And you know what it's like a few years into your marriage or several years into your marriage where you don't even have to use words to be in conflict, right? You can just read the body language. You can get triggered by just watching how your spouse is acting. And so Carey and I got into that. We would get into this conflict where Carey was upset because he felt I wasn't pulling my full weight, my full responsibilities as a co-owner of the house, as someone who needed to help with the cleaning and all the cooking and all those things that have to get done, that I wasn't pulling my weight and didn't care about how he felt.
And I felt like you were focused on the kids and you felt like I was focused on my work, which probably is accurate at the time.
Yeah, and so I felt that you weren't fully supporting me as a parent, or maybe you were competing with the kids for my time, and maybe we're self-focused. And so we just ended up bumping up against each other, and we found ourselves sometimes at an impasse. And, our marriage felt more like a battle at that stage. And so when you're in a battle, then what emotions do you experience? It's not necessarily the like, right? You end up experiencing the emotions of battle, the fear, anger, loneliness, sadness. And so what do you do when your marriage feels like a battle and you're weighed down?
Yeah, and I think by the grace of God, you had the presence of mind and heart to put your obedience to stay in. We wanted to take divorce off the table, to stay in the marriage, and I put that on, I want to stay in the marriage. But we realized that our emotions couldn't rule it, because if our emotions ruled it, we were in trouble. So that was the first thing. Oh, go ahead.
Well, and the tension is that, I made a commitment, so I want to keep this commitment. And on the other hand, I want to have a marriage where we are connected. I don't want to have a marriage that is appears to be a marriage on the outside, but doesn't feel like a marriage on the inside. Yeah. And it was a tension.
So the second thing we learned to do in the midst of those tough years was we focused on fighting for each other, not with each other. Because the default is, I'm just going to fight with you, you're going to fight with me, I'm going to want to win, you're going to want to win, but we had to figure out another way to fight.
Yeah, and this was a hard-learned lesson for us, to not fight with, but to fight for. It was, you might think that as pastor and his wife, we get to be in a different category. We get a get out of jail free card. But no, that's not true. One day, Carey was home from work, and you were working at the dining room table, and I was in the kitchen chopping up vegetables, and we were having a conversation, and then we just found that the conversation became an argument, and the argument became a heated argument, and then we just escalated from there, and soon I was out of control, angry. And so what I'm going to tell you next is actually really embarrassing. Nod if you promise not to judge me. Do I see a few nods, please? So I took what I had in my hand, and with all the force I could muster, I just launched it at him, but not to miss. And so the argument stopped. We stared at each other. I was horrified. What I didn't tell you is that what I had in my hand was this little snack bag of lettuce. And so even though I threw it as hard as I could, it started off well, and then it just kind of floated, and then it dropped. Yeah. And so
I'm still recovering. Yeah, but that was Tuesday, honey. We've made a lot of progress since then. I'm kidding. That was a while ago.
Oh yeah, so I learned something that day. It's, if you're really angry, don't throw a snack bag of lettuce. It's so emotionally unsatisfying.
Yeah.
But I'm making this confession to you because I want to just illustrate for you what it is like to fight with. That snack bag of lettuce, it's completely impotent, right? There's no power in it. In fact, it's a waste of time and energy. And at its worst, it's actually destructive, right? Toxic. Fighting with is like tearing down. And so, in terms of fighting with, we have to make that switch to fighting for. How can I fight for my spouse? And that was a long transition for us. That was not easy to do. By long, I mean more than a decade. It was not a quick process. Maybe
and it was gradual over time. But one of the things I think we were both doing is I was putting you under a magnifying glass, and you were putting me under a magnifying glass, and
Well, yeah, and isn't that so true? I mean, I've seen a lot of fights in a lot of marriages. I've practiced as a family lawyer, and so in our marriage and then other marriages, I just see this dynamic where when we're fighting with our spouse, we tend to put on the rose-colored glasses for our own position, our own behavior, our own attitude. But we tend to pick up the magnifying glass when it comes to my husband, my wife. And so I've also seen another dynamic in most marriages. This is pretty much universally true, that when we fight, with our spouse in our marriages, both people end up claiming to be the victim. So I'm the victim, I claim I'm the victim, Carey claims he's the victim, and we both get this dynamic going, and to a certain extent we're both right. I mean, we're all broken people. But if I hold on to the belief that I'm a victim, then we get nowhere good. And so we discovered that to fight for Carey's heart, I had to fight for my own, and to fight for the freedom of my heart, I have to stop playing the victim. And I actually have to be willing to take off the rose-colored glasses, put them down, and pick up the magnifying glass and do the hard thing, turn it to myself. Because what happens with a magnifying glass? You see everything bigger, it's amplified. And so you see the things that you really don't want to see, but you can see them bigger. And so, if I pick up the magnifying glass and look at my own role in this broken dynamic in our relationship, then I'm more likely to see my pride or my contempt or my bitterness. And so if you really want to make this transition from fighting with to fighting for, you have to refuse to play the victim.
Third thing we did was we prayed for our marriage. And Tony's always been very, very faithful in prayer. For me, you would think as a pastor, it's like, well, of course you're going to pray for your marriage. But it takes a lot of work for me as a man to pray out loud with my wife for our marriage. And it's still a discipline. Some of you who were part of our church last year, you might remember we ran through like a spiritual gifting assessment. And so I looked at my spiritual gifts, my bottom 3 spiritual gifts. Third from the bottom was prayer. Second from the bottom was mercy. And at the very bottom was helps. So great profile for a pastor. I'm not going to help you, and I really don't care. And don't ask me to pray about it, okay? Because I'm not good at that either. Those are not natural things for me, but prayer is a daily discipline. But there is almost this invisible barrier, I find, to praying out loud with your spouse. But I learned that I had to overcome that resistance, and I had to do it. And Tony, you prayed faithfully day after day for years and years and years. I pray every day, but I think you're more naturally gifted at it. But for me, that's just so important. And a broken prayer is better than no prayer. And sometimes when, in our worst season, there were pretty broken prayers where it was just like, Lord, help. But for me, it was really important to do. So I would say as a guy, it's really important to pray for your marriage. There's a statistic in one of Dr. Phil's books that says the divorce rate is roughly 50%. You can argue it's 40 or whatever, pick your number. But for couples that pray together out loud on a regular basis, the divorce rate drops to, the stat he quoted was 1 in 10,000. So even if you cut that to 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 100, I'll take a 1% chance over a 50% chance. So pray out loud with your spouse, even if you find that hard.
And if prayer is new to you, your prayer, there's no formula.
Right.
It's a very simple prayer will do, such as, Jesus, please show up. Mm-hmm. Show me that you're real. God, help us. We don't know what to do. So don't believe that there are any fancy or magical words that you need to say. It's a very simple prayer will do it. But praying together has power, we believe.
Fourth thing we did was we went to other people for help. There's a tendency to be, like, even talking about this is still hard, and there's a tendency to want to keep everything secret. And just because you shouldn't tell everybody doesn't mean you shouldn't tell anybody. And so we solicited help from our small group. We've always been part of a small group, and they were really helpful, and we wouldn't tell them everything. They're not our counselors, but it's just like, hey, would you guys pray for us? It's been a really tough week. We'd have conversations like that. Obviously, friends and sometimes family. And then we also went to see a good Christian counselor. And you had been saying almost since the very beginning, decades ago, that I should go to a counselor. But early in my years in ministry, I had this like pride and ego thing that I sent people to counseling. I didn't go to counseling. And there was, in my mind, a stigma attached to it. It was an admission of weakness. And I still remember the very first time. You'd been urging me for a year or two to go. And I remember finally I said, okay, I'll go. More, I think, just to get you off my back than because I really thought I needed help. But I remember driving up to, he was an hour north of us, driving up to that counselor and sitting in the parking lot. And we were going to go together. And I remember you got out of the car first. And I thought, I'm not going. Like, I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to go grab coffee. I'll pick you up in an hour. And it took everything I had in me to get out of the car, to walk up those steps and go into that office. And even then, I spent the first hour trying to convince him how I had no issues. It was all Toni. Then, of course, he opened his mouth and I realized, okay, I'm dead. I'm done. Like, there's a lot in here that needs to be explored. But that was huge for us, is getting help.
Yeah, I've seen so many marriage fights where a counselor, people will go to a counselor maybe once or twice and say, oh, it didn't work. But I would just encourage you to keep going, keep going until you find a counselor you both can connect with. You need to both have chemistry with the counselor. You both need to have a relationship of trust with the counselor. So if one of you has a long-term relationship with a counselor, then really it's not fair to expect the other person to step into that scenario. It will feel unbalanced. And so find someone who's neutral.
Don't try to get that third party to gang up on your partner.
And we, naturally, we believe in the power of Christ, the light of Christ. And so Carey and I would look for a counselor who also is a Christ follower, who would bring the light of Christ into the center of the counseling.
Yeah, so my advice is find a good Christian counselor. There are Christian counselors who are not good. We have a list at our locations. You can find them. And then there are good counselors who are not Christian as well. And I think when you find a good Christian counselor, you bring Christ to the center of it, and for us, that's been pivotal in the progress that we've seen in our marriage. Mm-hmm. Okay, number 5, we kept the date night, which often turned into fight night, which was a lot of fun. But that's one thing we did very consistently. Is we always, even when the kids were in hockey and school and the whole deal, it was like, no, we're going to have a date night every week. But it would sometimes turn into fight night, often, in the worst nights.
Yeah, in some seasons, date night was still hard to have a date night. And so I remember we used to try to make date nights affordable. And so we would exchange babysitting favors with friends of ours, and sometimes we'd go for coffee or we'd go for a walk. And once in a while, we would go out to a nice restaurant. And so that was a big deal. And so one night we found ourselves at a very nice restaurant in Barrie that had white linen tablecloths and candlelight and delicious food. And so we sat down and we started talking about what was happening with the kids and what was happening with our schedules. And we didn't talk about, how's your heart? How are you? And so we just quickly found ourselves in one of those arguments again. And we did what maybe some of you know, when you're in a small restaurant and you're kind of whisper fighting, and you go, like, stop it, you're ruining our date night.
Well, we knew people in the restaurant, which makes it really awkward, right? It's like, there's the pastor and his wife.
And it got so bad. It got so bad, we walked out in the middle so we didn't wreck everyone else's night.
Yeah, we didn't get to dessert that night.
No.
Anyway, but I think the discipline of a date night is really important. And we also did something when the kids were young where we would try to go away for at least 1 or 2 nights every year without the kids. Because that's really important to do. And we found, like, as time went on, we'd tell our friends that we're going away, and they'd be like, oh, we haven't done that in 5 years or 8 years or whatever. And we just always did it, and those were pivotal moments for us to do. So keep a date night.
Yeah, keep a date night and keep the date night as date night. So your date night can't bear the weight of all the conversations you haven't had during the week. Right. Every day you need to have some time to connect on those family business things, like, what's happening with the kids and who needs to be home on Tuesday night and all the scheduling. So try to keep that away from date night.
Yeah, so the other thing we did is, as our kids got older and we were further into our relationship, is we realized we had to build an authentic friendship that's not centered around our kids. One of the great surprises for me when you get married, you have kids almost right away. 18 months after we got married, we had our first child, and then you're in those child raising years, you think it's never going to end, right? It's like these kids are going to be around forever. And of course, you realize they're not. And we're now empty nesters. So if you wonder how it is, it's amazing, okay, if you're wondering. It's like hashtag date night every night. So they eventually do leave home. And we had a clarifying moment about a decade ago where our oldest got his driver's license. That meant the level that meant you didn't have to be in the car with him. And so Jordan said, okay, I'm taking Sam, and this dates it. We're going to Blockbuster to get a movie. Remember that, when you used to have to go to a store to get a movie? Anyway, so Tony and I are standing in our living room, kind of nervous because our kids are leaving for the very first time in our life without us. They're backing out of the driveway. We see the headlights go out. They head into town to get the movie. And it was like we're standing in our house alone for the first time in 16 years with our kids gone on their own power. And it's like, I felt like turning to you and shaking your hand and saying, hey, I'm Carey, remember me? You know, do we still like each other? And we started to talk about the next season of life, which is coming up and which we're in right now. And I remember doing some research about it. And we discovered some pretty sobering stats because we knew within 6 or 8 years, our kids were going to be gone. They'd be at college. And when the youngest kid goes to college, there's an actual statistical spike in the divorce rate. And if you've got tension in your marriage, you understand why. And we said, well, we don't want that. Divorce, we don't want to be an option for us. And then the other option is like parallel lives. It's really a contract type thing where, okay, you have your friends, I have my friends. You have your vacation, I have my vacation. You have your bank account, I have my bank account. You have your hobbies, I have my hobbies. And we're like, well, we don't want that. We don't want that to be us. Or the third option is maybe you forge an authentic friendship. Like maybe you try to remember, why did we fall in love? What is going to keep us together? And over the last decade or so, you know, we pursued shared hobbies. I was getting into cycling. You bought a bike. You love snowshoeing. I don't, but I bought snowshoes. And we just found stuff we love to do together. And that friendship has become so much more deep and real even than it was in the beginning. But that's not the inevitable path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes you just have to take baby steps. We know a couple who, at one point in their marriage, they would have said they were completely disconnected, like to the point where they were seriously considering separating. And so when they decided that they wanted to take the first step, it was a baby step. They said they would watch one TV show together once per week. That was their starting point. That was the baby step. And now, so many years later, they have developed the friendship that they longed for in their marriage.
I don't know who that is.
You don't have
Do you want to name them? No, I'm kidding. They probably go to church here. Anyway, never mind. I'm like, okay. Number 7, finally. Number 7. We waited long enough for our emotions to catch up to our obedience. Mm-hmm. And I think you've got a lot of that already. We just got to the point now, though, where we didn't think it was possible. If you talked to us probably in our worst moments, I would have said, like, really? Have all those feelings come back? But they have come back deeper and more intense than they even existed at the beginning.
They have. Yeah, I feel like I've gone through a complete transformation in my emotional state from where I was, the emotions of battle, to now experiencing love and joy and all those things that you want in your marriage. But it doesn't happen easily, and we have to take those baby steps and wait in the meantime. The Bible talks about a lot of gardening and farming imagery, I think because it's so familiar to people. And so the psalmist talks about the principle of the harvest. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them, sheaves of wheat. And so here we hear this principle of carrying seeds and weeping. So going out, it's not going out with already having the emotions of victory. It's going out weeping, carrying seeds to sow. And the promise is the return with songs of joy, carrying the sheaves of the harvest. And in between those two events, there's a gap, right? And that is the wait. There's the planting, the seeding, then the nurturing and the growth, and that is the waiting period. And so I just encourage you to have the patience to wait for the harvest.
Well, as we wind down today, we wanted to share these 7 principles with you. And again, they're not bulletproof, but they really helped us. And if you think they'll be helpful to you, we got a lock screen for your phones that you can get for free. Just text the word marriage to this number, and you will automatically get the lock screen. And you can do that if you're in the room or watching online today. And you'll get that absolutely free. And hopefully, these are things we still remember. Because every day isn't perfect, but it is so much better than it was. And so the thing we want to leave you with today is simply this. Is there anything dead in your relationship? Like when you think about your marriage and you think about what you thought it would be and maybe what it is, what's died? Like, has the intimacy died? Maybe it's sexual. It's like, that died. Maybe the feeling, the spark, the excitement of being in the same room with each other is gone and it evaporated. Maybe it's just like life feels like drudgery. Because, I really believe he came to the right place. And that's what Jesus wants to do. And I feel like that's what he did in our marriage because we kept looking to him. Because if we look to ourselves, we only got more of us. But we looked to Jesus and we discovered that the best place to find resurrection is in a graveyard. So if there's anything in your marriage or in your life that feels like a graveyard, you've come to the right person. And that is what, like, God actually does miracles. And sometimes we think miracles sound so supernatural, but it's like resurrection means no, it was dead and now it's not dead anymore. So what was dead that you would love to see life into? Because in a couple minutes we're going to pray for you. And we'd love you to bring that before God. And you've got a scripture you want to share.
Well, yes, the Apostle Paul, one of Jesus' followers, a great evangelist, he was praying for his church and writing to them, and he said, I pray that you may know his incomparably great power for us who believe. And I don't want you to miss that word, incomparably. There's no power like it in this world. We have nothing that measures up. There's no other source of power that is the same as the power that Christ offers. This incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is the same as the mighty strength he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead. And so I just want to encourage you, as someone who has gone from the place where I felt like our marriage was dead. I didn't know how we were going to make it through. And I have experienced that resurrection power of Christ in my marriage. So I just want to encourage you, those of you who are in that place, that you don't have to leave your marriage there in the graveyard. You can reach out to Christ, and he has the ability to perform a miracle, and he longs to do it. So lean into what Christ has for you.
So we'd love to pray for you. And the best place to find resurrection is in the graveyard. And what we'd love to do is we'd love you to stand as we pray. So at all of our locations, if you would stand, Toni and I are going to pray for you. And we really have seen God, like, I wish you could be on the inside at our lowest moments and see, I don't know what you were feeling, I know what I was feeling. I think it was probably harder on you than it was on me. But I also know how good it is now. And again, not every day is perfect. Sometimes when you write a message together, it's harder than writing one on your own. We've learned that as well. But I'll tell you, there are some great moments ahead. And maybe you don't believe it. And that's exactly why you need a power that isn't from you. And we're going to invite you to bring that power into your heart, into your relationship. And if that's something you'd like, here's what we're going to do. Toni's going to start off praying. We'd love for you just to pray this way with your hands open, with your palms up. All right? If you want that in your marriage, if you want that in your relationship, pray with your palms up. I've learned to pray that way. It's a way that positions yourself to receive. And then if there's someone, maybe you came in fighting in the parking lot, like grab their hand when we start to pray and just let them know that you're still in, that you still love them, that you still care. All right? And we're going to pray for you. So, Toni, would you start?
Dear God, we come before you and thank you for your unfailing love. God, we thank you that you have promised to be close, that you promised to be near us, and you have a power that goes beyond anything that we know. It goes beyond anything that we can access of our own devices. God, you are the one who wants to resurrect the dead places in our marriage. And you are the one who can do it, God. You're the one who can bring us from a marriage that is a place of pain to a place of refuge. You can take us from a place of pain to a place of joy, and a place of weakness to a place of strength. And so, God, I just pray that you would be present here, Lord. Please encourage each broken heart and for those people who haven't even met you, God, I pray that they would taste and see that you are real. I pray this in Jesus' name.
Lord, I just pray for every relationship at our locations, those who are listening, those who are watching. God, you can do what we can't do, and you did it. You did it. We saw it. And we thank you. And thank you that emotions eventually catch up to obedience. Thank you that when there is no way, you make a way. Thank you that what we declare dead, you can make alive. And Father, I want to pray in particular for every man in relationship right now. We don't do as well with our emotions. We don't like to pray out loud. And God, I pray for every man who struggles in those areas, who's finding more respect at work than they are at home, or who's looking to the bottom of a bottle or pills or drugs or alcohol, who's looking to porn, who started an affair, who's moving outside of the bounds of his relationship, his marriage, thinking it's going to be better somewhere else. God, just bring him back. And Lord, in our brokenness, will you make us new? I pray you would give every man courage to say that what they're looking for salvation will not bring them salvation. You alone, Jesus, will. And I pray you'd give us the courage to squeeze the hand of the person that we want to care about, but maybe stop caring about. To say, I'm still in, I just don't know how to be in. And I pray you would do a great work, God, today, throughout this series and far beyond, that you would do a great work and you would make alive what we feel is dead, because we know you can do it. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is the power that's at work at those in us, in those of us who believe. And so we surrender this to you, and we pray this together in Jesus' name.